everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD, anxiety spectrum disorders, and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed clinician specializing in OCD and anxiety. This is a question and answer-based podcast where you can go over to fearcastpodcast.com, send me a question over there by clicking on the Submit a Question link. You can also send an audio question by recording your question and emailing me a link to it or emailing me the file to it. You can send it to questions@fearcastpodcast.com, or you can send me a link in the Submit a Question box at Fearcast Podcast. Thank you all so much for joining me today. First off, I hope everybody is doing well. Things in my life are just as crazy as always, so I appreciate everybody's patience with getting these episodes out. Again, we're moving, so that means that we are moving into a fixer-upper as you do. So that means I'm after all the kids go to sleep, I go over to the new house and I work on it, and I paint or I sand or I do something, and it's taken up a whole bunch of time, but I'm getting these episodes out, so I appreciate your patience and continued support in that. So first, before we get into the episode today, I just want to do a little plug for the IOCDF online conference. If you have availability on November 4th through 6th, so that's coming up, not this weekend, but the weekend after, check it out. There's going to be a ton of talks. It's all online, so wherever you are in the world, you can get access to it. And I think if you get access to it, or if you attend the conference, all the talks are pre-recorded, so you can see each and every talk, I think probably for about 2 weeks after. Oh, let's see here. Content will be available for 60 days following the event. So you get 2 months to watch each and every talk, and there's going to be a ton of talks. And one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is I and Kelly Frankie and Lauren Rosen are teaming up yet again to do a couple of talks, so you can find out which ones we're at, but there's going to be a bunch of fantastic speakers from all over the world giving chats there. So if you or a family member or a loved one or someone interested in learning more about OCD and anxiety treatment, the online conference is probably going to be the best place to go to get that information and to get a jump start on that. So, so check it out. Go over to iocdf.org, and there's going to be some information there. So, without further ado, everybody, let's get into this episode. So today is going to be another installment in the Anxiety in the Arts series. So a little while ago, I released a couple of episodes every other week with interviewing someone in the arts in some sort of facet. So visual artist, performing artist, musician, something like that. And what I really want to do is put a spotlight on people who are artists and are expressing themselves in some sort of artistic fashion. But anxiety sometimes impacts their life, impacts their ability to do art, and sometimes their art influences or manifests through their art. So it's a lot of different things, and I just wanted to put a spotlight on that for people out there who, may be struggling with anxiety, depression, other mental health issues, and impacting their ability to be an artist. So today I have an interview with someone who reached out to me after that series and said they wanted to share their story. So by the way, I will say, if you would like to share your story, I would love to hear it, and I think other people would be interested in it too. Go over to Instagram. You can go to fearcastpodcast.com and send me a message over there, but you can also send me a message over at Instagram. I'm Fearcast Podcast over there. So send it to me over there, and I'll be more than happy to try to figure out a time that works. So today I'm interviewing Erica, and I'm sharing her story, and she's sharing her story with all of us. So I'll tell you a little bit about her, and then we'll get into the interview. So, Erica has been a musician since she was 5 years old. Over the course of her life, she's performed solo or in bands, orchestras, and ensembles across the United States and Canada, whether it's been through piano, clarinet, saxophone, percussion, or guitar. She's now a guitar teacher and mental health advocate for OCD, anxiety, and depression, and hopes to help others in their mental health journeys. So, without further ado, here's my chat with Erica. All right, Erica, thank you so much for joining us for the Fearcast today for the Anxiety in the Arts series. So you've been so kind to agree to join today to talk about your experience with anxiety, your experience with performing arts and the arts. And I'd love to hear about how you've experienced anxiety, what your activity is within the arts, and kind of how those two things have overlapped. So first off, again, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Kevin. It's great to be here. I think I have to start from the very beginning. I started playing piano when I was almost 5 years old. I was like 4.5. Mm-hmm. And obviously it was, well, maybe it's not obviously, but it was forced on me. I definitely did not request to play piano. My older sister already had been playing for about 2.5 years, and I had kind of been tinkering on the keys for a while, watching her take lessons and everything. This does kind of go in line with a lot of, I guess, immigrant households, and especially like Chinese American households. My parents definitely valued me playing piano and me being good at piano, and part of it, as I think, is to encourage, I guess, a creative mind, but also just encourage discipline. And so I had a lot of experiences with music that were really mixed. I think I had a lot of memories of my sister in tears because she was playing piano, and I wasn't good enough for my dad, I just felt like a lot of our, I guess, this is good. I didn't think of it this way then, but now I think about it, it feels like a lot of our worth, I guess, as children were tied to how well we did in piano lessons and how much we were progressing. So I ended up starting to take piano lessons, and I actually was really good at it. Teachers I had all commented about, how strong my fingers were and how I was, naturally gifted at it. Not to toot my own horn, but I was pretty good at it. And
you can toot your own horn
I was classic. Yeah, I was classically trained, so everything I learned. If anyone's listening who is a classical pianist, I went through the Hanon books, Czerny, Beethoven, Chopin, Schubert, Schumann, everyone. And so kind of throughout my piano career, I guess, I've just played a lot of different composers. And so when I was little, I was with the same teacher for about 2 years, and I was living in Canada at the time. I'm actually was born in Canada. And then I moved to the US when I was 6.5. So I switched teachers, and the teacher I switched to was much a little bit less strict than my former teacher in Canada. My teacher in Canada was also Chinese, and she was very kind, but she definitely was very strict in terms of what she expected from me practice wise. And when I got to my teacher in the States, I think I honestly feel like she gave me a little too much leeway sometimes, because she thought that I was talented, and which is a good thing, but also, she didn't really notice when I didn't practice, because it didn't really make a difference whether or not I was practicing at the time. So it was kind of confusing, because I had all these teachers giving me feedback about how good I was, but then at home I'm getting berated for not practicing, and for after every performance I would do, my dad, or usually my dad would say things like, I heard that mistake you made, I heard you made some mistakes, and sometimes he'd be joking, but it was just kind of always you did a good job, but here's your mistakes. Just notice you did made some mistakes. The killer but in there. Yeah. Good job, but. Yeah. Exactly. So So yeah, I mean, I had pretty high confidence in my piano ability, I guess. But eventually it never was really a fun thing for me because of the amount of pressure I faced to be good at piano. Especially because my parents and my teachers could tell that, I had potential as to be a professional musician. And my dad's dream, honestly, if he hadn't become a scientist like he is now, his dream was to be a musician. And so I feel like he kind of imposed that dream onto me and wanted me to be successful as a musician. And so a lot of it was just, I associated piano with a lot of dread, but at the same time, a lot of positive reinforcement. It's like my teachers think I'm great, and then at home I feel like I'm not practicing enough, I'm not doing well enough, there's just something's wrong, and I'm being yelled at all the time. And so I had really mixed feelings about it. And then eventually in 4th grade I started learning clarinet, and clarinet was fun because I associated clarinet with a lot more positive emotions, I guess, than piano at the time, because it was always it's more of an ensemble environment. Piano is a very solo, lonely kind of world because it's just, it's just yourself, not playing with anyone else most of the time. But clarinet, I was in a band, I was in jazz band, I was in different ensembles, and I had a lot of fun. And then, eventually in high school, I ended up in marching band, and that was fun. And still playing piano all throughout, and had been started to consider, majoring in music as either one of my only majors or one of them. And again, like I don't know. I mean, eventually me playing clarinet and being in band started to be associated with certain negative emotions as well, because my band director in high school was, he was kind of strange. And as teenagers, we didn't really know what to do about it. He looking back on it, it was pretty clear that he kind of groomed a lot of the younger male students, in the sense that he would pull them onto his laps in the middle of class. He would give preferential treatment to certain boys in the class. And if they had special meetings with him, and he also would just call us names. Like one time he I looked down or something. I was playing in the pit orchestra, and he said I looked like a bitch, and I need to smile more or something. And I remember just being like, I could leave, and he said, I'm just kidding. I love you. So it was kind of strange. It felt like I was I don't know. We didn't really know what was going on. All we knew as teenagers was to complain and think he was weird, but we didn't report him or anything because we didn't really know any better.
Right.
Yeah. And so, I feel like I've just had a lot of interesting interactions with music teachers overall. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah. And this is a little bit there's still a little more to the story, I guess, is my senior year of high school, I decided to switch piano teachers because my teacher was getting older and she was frequently sick. And a lot of the times she would forget what we had done in our lessons. And so what ended up happening was I switched to a harsher, kind of stricter Russian teacher. And this teacher
was that intentional? Did you seek that out, or was it just you found a teacher, they happened to be more strict in Russian?
I think I sought a stricter teacher because I felt like my teacher was she didn't notice when I didn't practice, right? Or she would forget what we did in lessons. So part of it was I think I had just it had just felt like the teacher student relationship had gotten a little bit stale in the sense that I wasn't growing much more from her instruction. Although I really loved her as a person, and she was probably one of the kindest people I ever knew. But I think I just needed, I think I wanted a harsher reality at the time. So I sought out this stricter teacher. And unfortunately, she kind of just, if my other teacher was super kind, she was just the complete opposite end of the spectrum. She said that she was putting her reputation in jeopardy by even having me as a student. She said that, my playing is extremely behind all of her other students. She said that I was probably even worse than some of her like 9-year-old students. She'd constantly talk about how all of her other students that she had posted pictures of on the wall had all gotten into like Yale and Harvard and gone on scholarships, and they've played all over the world. Like, meanwhile, she is doing me a favor, doing my parents a favor by accepting me as a student.
Jeez.
And she just was very nice. She also, when we had our lessons, she would walk away and talk on her phone for about 30 minutes and just play some recordings on repeat and tell me to just play along with the recording and then tell me to play that way. So yeah. And then at the end of the day, like when I was applying to, because my whole intention behind getting a stricter teacher was to kind of whip me in shape for auditions for college. She ended up refusing to write me recommendations for music school because she said it would ruin her reputation. So I think this was around the time my like self-esteem with anything that had to do with my musicianship just really plummeted, because I felt like, yeah, I mean, she was just, there was never any positive reinforcement with her. It was all the motivation was driven by me not being good enough, I guess. And so anyways, that affected me throughout college because, I'd had multiple, when you're a music major, you continue. I did get into music school as a piano major. Okay. And I
take that, teacher.
No thanks to her, right? But I think there were certain places I did not get into because she refused to write me a recommendation. And so, even in college, I just doubted how good I was compared to everyone else. I felt like my teachers, I probably saw more judgment in them than they maybe actually wanted to show to me. But it's just because I was like, I constantly felt like I was being criticized, and also just the classical piano world is kind of, it's tough out there. There's a lot of good musicians, and I think it's also a reality check. I was definitely the best pianist in my high school, but not in college. And, classical pianists, certain environments tend to be pretty toxic, and people will tell you exactly what they think you did wrong, and they'll also attribute it to your worthiness as like a colleague or a peer or whatever. So yeah, I mean, overall, like performance anxiety has always, it was not really a thing for me until I was around 16, because I honestly used to think I was great. I was like, I'm so good at piano. And then all of a sudden I think it was after maybe the first time I didn't place in a competition that I realized that everyone else had been practicing all these years, and my years of not practicing as much were catching up to me. And then that's when I started to realize that the playing field had been kind of evened out, and I now was starting to feel pressure, and that's when the performance anxiety kind of came in. And I mean, it never really stopped me from performing, but it was just, sometimes you could visibly see my legs shaking the entire time, my hands shaking, and it would obviously cause more mistakes than I probably made by myself. And in college, we had monthly, or was it weekly, student recitals, and I did not participate in any of them throughout my entire 4 years because I was just honestly worried of what my peers would think of me. Even though I had gotten in the exact same way that they did, I still felt like for some reason I was the worst of them all. So, I mean, I ended up doing a student recital just on my own senior recital and junior recital. But in terms of like the recitals that were held in front of the entire department, I completely avoided those. because I don't know, I didn't want to like mess up. So
yeah. I mean, those performances can be a lot of pressure. I mean, you're putting yourself out there in front of your peers. There can be a lot of worry of that judgment and criticism. But I mean, during all this time, was there any effort to try to kind of push against some of this anxiety, or try to work on the anxiety, or was it just kind of a white knuckling sort of position you took against it?
I mean, I think I really subscribe to this mentality of the tortured artist.
Okay.
I kind of gave in to the idea that music wasn't supposed to be passion for me. I didn't really feel happy playing. I considered quitting my major many times. And I think I had honestly kind of a twisted relationship. I sometimes thought of my relationship with piano as like an arranged marriage. I literally used to think that because I was like, I was forced into this, and it's so complicated because sometimes, I really do like it, and I really do feel like the things I'm playing are helping me express emotions. But then other times, like just the environment I'm in is so toxic. And so I don't know. I feel like I really didn't. I think I just accepted. I was like, I think I'm just gonna always have a tortured relationship with music. But that was in college. I mean, now I'm undoing that, I guess. Because I'm a piano teacher now. Okay. So I teach piano outside of work. It's like my second job. I realized that it took me like honestly a year or two to realize that I was teaching my students in the way that I had been taught, which wasn't the most fun way. It was very practical, very not clinical necessarily, but just you need to play this note wasn't right. Okay, do it again. And I still do some elements of that, but I'm also incorporating games now. Okay. I used to tell them I was disappointed in them if they weren't practicing, and now I don't do that because I realize it doesn't help. I don't know. It's like I used to say that because that's what I was told. Like disappointment and shame and that kind of stuff. It's
tough to break those habits. I mean, those are kind of the examples. Those are the examples we see from our teachers, and we kind of just make those associations. This is the way that piano is taught. This is the way that this is done. So, what was it like then to kind of catch yourself teaching in a way that didn't really sit well with you, and then making it sounds like there was a conscious decision to teach in a different way, but maybe I'm reading into that.
No, it definitely was. It took me a while to notice it. I mean, I think it's one of those things you start to do without even realizing you're doing it, and something you bought into without even realizing you bought into it as a kid. Like, for example, one of my students, I mean, it's normal for kids to cry, right? But like, I remember one time I felt like I really hadn't said much. I was like, I'm just disappointed that you didn't practice. And this kid just started crying a lot. And it's not like I yelled at him, but obviously the disappointment was enough for him to feel like deep shame. Yeah. And I feel like when you feel a lot of shame, it's really hard for you to, I guess in some ways it'll motivate you, but when you're a kid and this is supposed to be fun, like that's not really going to keep you going. You're going to start associating that activity with shame. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, I mean, is this the kind of relationship I want with my students? I don't know. Like, I just started to realize that, it's just more fun for me and for them if we both try to have fun during the lesson, and for me to lower my expectations with them. I'm also part of this like piano teacher group on Facebook, so I get some tips from them. That
is interesting. I wonder how does how does that Facebook group approach teaching? Because I can imagine that there's this kind of very old school mindset of like, and this, I imagine that there's this hierarchical sort of thing where there's, I wonder if people who are teaching, quote, very high-end teaching, for lack of a better word, very high-end playing, do they view teaching as something, or teaching in piano as something that is a job, a focus, a thing that you need to put hard effort to, and it's not fun, it is serious business? And or what is that dynamic in that group?
It depends. The internet draws a lot of extreme, I guess,
crazy
opinions
people.
Either end.
Yeah.
Right. And so there are certain people who are like, teachers will ask for advice, for example, like, oh, what should you do if this student is not learning this concept correctly and it's been like years? And some teachers will be like, drop them. They're not worth your time. You shouldn't be expected to put in effort for a student who's not putting in effort to practice. It's your own studio, just like fire them, whatever. And then other teachers will be like, I was that kid who didn't practice 5 years, and then one day I decided that I wanted to practice, and then I'm so glad my teacher didn't give up on me. So it really depends, I think, on the teacher. Yeah.
So let's just be less. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've been trying to be on the more compassionate side, where I'm not giving up on you, despite how frustrating it might be to teach the same concept over and over again.
Right. I suppose this is a good time to point out, let this be a lesson to everybody, that the internet is full of opinions and not every single person is right. So. Right.
Exactly.
Oh man, yeah. So in taking that shift, I mean, one of the things that I wrote down here is I wrote down joy, fun, question mark. Is there any? You talked about enjoying clarinet when you started playing in kind of jazz band and different ensembles. What role was fun or enjoyment in playing music, or specifically playing piano? Was that part of the discussion, or was that part of the exercise, or was it just simply, this is a ticket into an Ivy League, or this is something that you do as a Chinese American person?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like piano was probably the most complicated relationship I had with music. I also played other instruments, and I honestly, as I think about it, I feel like I have different. It's funny to say relationships, because you can't really have a relationship with an instrument, I guess. But I just have different associations with different instruments I've played. I've also played saxophone, guitar, and percussion instruments, and each one of those I've had different experiences with. So it's like, certain instruments I just feel, I had a better time playing because there was no environment in which there was negativity or toxicity.
Totally.
And so, yeah, piano, it was very much of a mixed bag. I mean, partly it's just because I've been playing piano for, almost like maybe 20, 23 years. And so it's kind of like, the longer you've spent with something, the more likely it is for it to not be fun as well.
Yeah.
I'm kind of rediscovering the fun now as I'm just learning pop songs and stuff like that. I find it to be fun when I'm singing along to something while I'm playing piano. But yeah, I mean, at the time, it really did not feel like, I really didn't understand why I was playing piano at all. Like, what my parents didn't really explain to me why. They just were like, it's good for you, and I guess, and you're good at it. And I wasn't really asked whether or not it was fun. Yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, in the sense that it doesn't sound like it was part of the discussion. It was just kind of this thing that you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's how has playing pop music, or the shift into more for lack of a better term, fun music. How has that changed your relationship with piano? And I'll say, I think you can definitely say you can have a different relationship with different instruments. I think that, I also have played saxophone, I've played bassoon, I've played guitar and bass and stuff like that. And with all of those, there is a different feel that you have with it, especially because that instrument also has a different role within music. You're going to take a different position, and it requires different things of you. So yeah, I think it's fair to say. But how has playing more fun music changed your relationship with piano?
I think it's made me realize that, not everything has to be perfect. That like if everything, I used to do this thing with my students where if all the notes and the rhythm weren't perfect, like they were going to work on it for another week. And at this point I'm accepting like 80%, and I think 80% is good enough for us to move forward with, because I want them to stay motivated, and they're not going to stay motivated if they're playing the same piece for 5 weeks. And so I'm starting to accept, a little bit of just like less perfectionism from both my students and myself. Kind of just learning things based on how I'm feeling. Like if I hear a song on the radio and I'm like, I just kind of want to figure it out, then I'll just do that, because it's, it's kind of like the soundtrack to my life right now. And I want to play a little bit of that. So yeah, I think that's kind of how it's changed it. And I don't know. I've been I realized that I was in such a kind of artsy environment in college that I don't really have that right now. And so I might as well try to get some of that back just by playing more music. Yeah.
How does your performance anxiety impact you today?
Yeah. Well, actually, I have not really, up until this past year, I had not really performed since college. So I graduated college about 6 years ago now. And my last performance was May of 2016. I did like a 45-minute long solo performance, essentially all classical music. And that was pretty much the last time I performed in front of a group of people until this past March or April, where a singer friend of mine reached out to me and said, she's like, my original, my regular pianist / accompanist is not available. Would you be available for this concert that I'm doing? And her concert was kind of mixed pop / classical. And so she gave me 3 weeks to learn the music, to learn 7 different pieces, which for me is a lot, especially with the fact that I work full time and then I teach until like 9 every night. It's like I could only practice either on the weekend or in the like 1 hour left until my neighbors get annoyed, and so it was not perfect. I made a lot of mistakes. But I mean, I am still kind of conditioned to not really react to mistakes in front of audiences. So, and I can keep things going if, things go wrong. That's just kind of what you learn as a performer. But yeah, it was my first time really performing in front of an audience in almost 6 years. And I was pretty nervous, and I wondered to myself the entire time, like, whether or not she thought I did a good job. I kind of like took her a little bit of delay in responses afterwards to mean that she didn't think I would do a good job. I kept replaying her face in my mind, like was this a real smile, or like was this just to make me feel better about how she actually thinks I'm a really bad performer? And sometimes when I go down that path, I start to think about all the other times where I wasn't kind of hired again for a gig, and I wonder, like, is it because I did a bad job, or is it just because we lost touch? Like, what was the real reason? And just starting to do a little bit, it starts to get a little bit obsessive, I guess, in that sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't affect me too much now because I just don't perform as much, but like in the times that I have, I definitely just see myself starting to doubt whether or not I did a good job. So.
Right. Did you ever put any effort to try to well, I'll finish the sentence. Did you ever put any effort to try to challenge those thoughts, or specifically those anxiety in those anxiety-ridden ones, like, I didn't get hired because of this terrible, horrible, awful reason, not maybe this more reasonable reason that, we lost touch, or they might have hired somebody else, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I try to tell myself that, it's been years and I will never be able to find out the actual reason. And that probably, it's hard, when to meet anxiety thoughts with logic sometimes, because it's just like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you are a better musician, better pianist than probably the majority of people But then it's like, oh, well, that's just because like most people don't play piano, So every time there's going to be some way I can come back at it with something that contradicts my rational, whatever thoughts.
Something just undermines you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, in terms of being a piano teacher, though, I use kind of more evidence to show. Sometimes I'm like, I'm not really a good piano teacher, but I mean, I feel like the fact that I have gotten most of my students from word of mouth does kind of show that there are people who are willing to, pay for my services and who keep recommending me. So in that sense, like, I have a little more security in myself with teaching, but performing it's always been just like, I don't know. It's different.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. It also sounds like the expectation about performing is a little bit different. It's a little bit more intense, and it sounds like there's more to lose in a sense with performing.
Yeah, and also it's hard because when you're a performer and maybe you have anxiety about it, people might come up to you afterwards and be like, oh my God, you did such a great job. And wow, that was so good. And then, in the back of my mind, it's just like, do you mean it? Or like, did you actually catch that? You're just being nice. I'm just like really overanalyzing their facial expressions and kind of just like, is it just because you play another instrument, so you don't actually know what a good pianist sounds like, or you don't play any instrument, so like you don't know what good piano sounds like? And then just constantly like trying to figure out how genuine their reactions are. But I mean, I sometimes am able to just kind of stop and be like, it doesn't matter, you did it anyways, and that should be something, I guess, to congratulate myself for, because it's been such a long time anyways.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man, catching yourself going down that rabbit hole of the rumination and analysis is so important, right? Because you're right. Ultimately, what you're doing is just getting into comparison and your imagination. What their words were good job.
Yeah.
And your brain went, but what's underneath that good job? Do they really mean good job? And then all you're doing is speculating. Ugh.
Right.
Man.
Yeah. Which makes you like a distrusting person. It's like,
totally,
and then other people can kind of like be, I mean, if you told them, right? I mean, I don't know. I've never actually been like, you're lying. But then they're going to think like, you think I'm a liar? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not saying you are. I'm just like speculating. Yeah. But so it's I don't know. It's not fun necessarily to live life like that. It's just constantly thinking that everyone means the opposite of what they're saying to you. So
it's a lot easier and a lot more peaceful to trust what the words other people are saying,
right?
And trust that they mean what they're saying.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's hard also because I feel like as a person overall, I try to be open-minded and kind of have a growth mindset. So it's hard when I start to figure out like even if they did have negative critical feedback for me, I should be able to accept that, and I should be able to grow from that and not take that so personally. And so I start to almost take like the compliments as hidden critical feedback and that I should grow from. So it starts to get all mixed up, and I think that's kind of where it comes from, is like I'm constantly trying to figure out ways I can be better. but yeah, like no one really told me to be that much better again. So it's like, I don't know. It's a mind game.
Yeah, no, it's a total mind game. It's interesting you said, I know I should just take their compliments, which implies that one, you're not taking their compliments, and that it would be of greater benefit to accept their compliments as is. You said I should be accepting their compliments, but, and then kind of went into undermining it. What has stopped you from accepting their compliments, and how could you practice being more accepting of compliments, or how have you been more accepting?
I think I just say thanks, even if I don't want to just say thanks.
Uh-huh.
I used to do this thing, which was pretty annoying, I think, as a person, as a thing that people do, is just, someone would give me a compliment and I'd be like, thanks, that's not true though, or something. It'd just be some weird offhanded remark about how, like, thanks, but actually I don't think I'm going to do well at all. Just something to completely undermine their compliment. And I I think right now I've just started to say thanks, and that's it. Thanks, period. Thank you.
Yeah. What sort of effect have you seen by taking that approach?
I think it just makes both of us in that situation more comfortable.
Yeah.
I feel like people get really uncomfortable if you say thanks to their compliment and then you completely show one of your insecurities, and it feels kind of, maybe it offends the person because it's like, oh, I was just trying to be genuine to you, but now you're twisting it for some reason. So it just makes the situation more comfortable and more pleasant for both of us if I just accept a compliment and I keep my own little anxieties to myself for later, or not at all. I don't know. It just ends it there.
Totally. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, so I know that we're getting to the end of our time. We could extend this out if you wanted to, or do a part 2 at some point, because I know you also have had OCD that has impacted your life, and has OCD impacted your music or your performance?
I think so. Not necessarily performance, but just in terms of when I work with certain people, depending on what the theme is, I end up, sometimes certain people will trigger certain intrusive thoughts. And, a lot of my intrusive thoughts center around more like, I guess, just taboo things, like sexual intrusive thoughts, or like harm intrusive thoughts and stuff like that. And I think that those are always an issue when you're like working really closely with someone, and you start to feel, guilty. I mean, this goes for any kind of intrusive thought you have when you're working closely with someone. But yeah, in music, I mean, it definitely has happened, and it makes me feel guilty because I'm like, I'm literally supposed to just be focusing on your musicianship, and now it's become this whole other thing in my head that I have to focus on, which that has been pretty frustrating. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I think I don't. The way I've been dealing with that really is just through typical, I think, OCD techniques. I guess is just trying to catch myself when I start to ruminate about what the thoughts mean, or trying to just accept the thoughts being there, trying to sit in the anxiety, all that stuff. I mean, it's hard, and it doesn't just get better over time, but I mean, it does get better over time. It doesn't just get better in the moment, like. If you're sitting there for 5 minutes, like the anxiety is probably still going to be there. But I mean, it has affected me for sure. Right.
Has it, so I mean, gosh, I know, unfortunately, in the sake of time, we'll have to start wrapping it up. But
no worries.
What are some top tips that you might have for someone who is kind of following through on a path similar to you? What are some things that you might suggest or recommend they could consider or look at or change that perhaps you wish you had done early on in your process?
Of being a musician, or with OCD and anxiety, I guess, or both? Good follow-up. Let's say both. I think it would be to try to recognize to set certain boundaries, and as to what kind of treatment you'll accept from peers, colleagues, and also just teachers, because I think I feel like as a child you don't really learn about boundaries in a very formal way. Maybe you say, stop hitting me or something, like if someone hits you, right?
Yeah.
But when it's not physical and your teacher is just slowly breaking you down over time by telling you, things like I'm doing you a favor, you're ruining my reputation, that kind of stuff. I think it's really important to notice, like, am I always upset around this person? Like, is this person always causing me frustration and shame? And like, just recognizing that, like, it doesn't have to be that way. Because I think for me, it was really hard because that was my norm. A lot of the time, it's just thinking that music was kind of destined to be, or piano playing was destined to be something that was always going to be hard and toxic. And so I just accepted the toxicity, I guess. So I guess my suggestion would be to try to set boundaries really early on, and as to what you'll accept from people, and really be honest with yourself about how you feel around certain people in certain environments. I
think that's brilliant advice.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. How about any recommendations for people who are experiencing OCD and kind of struggling with that in the course of their either performance or just in the course of their life?
Yeah, I would say to find a therapist who is informed about OCD. Right now, my therapist is probably my 6th or 7th therapist I've ever had. And that's because all the other ones either didn't really understand what OCD was, or tried to apply logic to my obsessions, or completely misunderstood the content of my obsessions and believed them. So I feel like it's really hard to know what you're looking for when you're first starting out, especially if you don't know the term OCD, I guess. But I would just say, like, first and foremost, like, if you're going to go on Psychology Today, just try to filter it by obsessive compulsive disorder instead of just anyone, because, talk therapy is not necessarily going to be helpful for you. So, I mean, I was talking to, side note, I had tried out this like relationship therapist for a second, and I was talking about how, like, I have OCD, and I was like talking about how I also sometimes think I experience symptoms of ADHD, but I'm not diagnosed with ADHD. I just find I share similar traits. And they were like, how does that go hand in hand? Because, with ADHD, because you say you're forgetful, but then you say that, you have OCD, and people with OCD tend to be more meticulous and have more attention to detail. And I was so confused, because I was like, you're like a therapist. I don't know. So
people can't see my eye rolling, but I hope they felt it. in that. I think I hear what you're saying. I think I'm totally on board trying to find a therapist who is experienced with OCD. And what I'll do is on the episode page, I'll tag a article from the IOCDF that talks about it's questions that someone can ask a potential therapist to get an idea if if they have experience and understand OCD and know what treatment's going to look like. So I'll tag that on there as well, because the problem with Psychology Today is everybody specializes in everything, and everybody on there specializes in anxiety and OCD, because everyone who goes through therapy school takes a CBT class. So they go, I've taken a CBT class, I know what I'm doing.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a little more complicated than just straight up just CBT.
Right, exactly.
As you can attest to. So Erica, I know I unfortunately have to let you go here, but I really appreciate you sharing your experience and just what life has been like for you, and what your experience through music and anxiety has been. Where can people find a little bit more about you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm on Instagram. I have my own podcast that I'm not a clinician. I am just someone with OCD and who, is passionate about mental health awareness and education. So I have a podcast called Just Say Maybe. You can find me on Instagram.com/Just Say Maybe podcast. I also just recently started a YouTube channel that's just called Just Say Maybe. I haven't really posted anything on there yet, but I am planning to. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, I'll provide links for all that in the Instagram post and on the episode page, so so people can find that at fearcastpodcast.com. So, awesome. All right, Erica, thank you so much for your time, and we really appreciate your story.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kevin. It was good to be here.
Absolutely.
All right, take care.
You too. Check. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for making it through that episode. It was such a fun chat to speak with Erica about her experience with music and anxiety. And there's so much more we could have talked about with her advocacy, her podcast, and how she's kind of rekindling her relationship with music. So that was a lot of fun. If you have questions for Erica or have follow-up questions, go to the Fearcast podcast and go to the submit a question link and message me that question. I'm sure Erica would be happy to be on the episode or on the podcast again in a future episode to answer any questions or to share more of her story. And again, if you would like to share your story for the Anxiety in the Arts series, message me over to Fearcast Podcast or over to Instagram. So please remember, everybody, that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of more help in your treatment, at Fearcast Podcast, you can go to the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information for you there. So, everybody, until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye.